Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Daire's Devils by Danielle Ackley-McPhail, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Master Sergeant Kevin Daire pushed to his feet, his chair's metal base squealing as it slid forcefully back at its anchor track. He slammed his scarred and calloused fists down, rattling the polymer matrix conference table and overpowering every sound in the war room. Conversations cut off abruptly as most of the room's occupants stilled, those combat-trained poised to act. Everyone pivoted toward him, but he didn't care. Too much was at stake. Too much had been risked and sacrificed for him to watch it all go down the relief tube now. I will not dignify this by calling it horse shit. He spoke the words crisp and clear, biting off each one, not even flinching when several ranking brows around the room drew down in stern lines. You have to understand what a threat these infiltrators represent, one of the tacticians began. Once our operative is in place, you are placing one of my team in a dangerous position, uninformed, unsupported, and unprepared. He paused, his jaw tightening and his gaze narrowing. That's a good way to get even a seasoned operative killed. Another squeal interrupted him as a second chair slid back in its track. At the end of the table, General Drovak slowly stood. His hair shone snowy white, and his jawline had gone a little soft with the years. The dark blue eyes glaring the length of the table, however, were plenty hard. 4 stars gleamed on each side of his collar. Master Sergeant, are you questioning orders? The silence became a living, quivering thing. No, sir, Daire responded, his tone flat. Just stating my concerns. Do you have any doubt that this situation is a threat of the highest order? Again, Daire answered. No, sir. General Drovak gestured to the aide beside him, who stood and accepted the sheath of papers the general held out, pivoted sharply, and marched the length of the table to deliver them. Though the aide's expression remained neutral, his gaze felt weighted, probing. Daire held it a moment before glancing down at the documents the man held out. Daire's brow furrowed. There were 2 sets of orders. Those on top bore his name. When he looked up to meet Drovak's eyes, the general showed no reaction. You will issue these orders immediately, the general commanded. Dismissed. Resigned, Daire took possession of the papers. The cluster he was caught in had just got infinitely more fucked. Chapter 1. Corporal Katrion Alexander could see no stars. Well, not from the command deck of the Groom experimental complex, anyway. The filter of the protective shielding and the harsh electric glare lighting the compartment rendered anything that would have been visible to her unaided eye imperceptible. 270 degrees of pure inky black surrounded her. That's why she liked being in space so much lately. It matched her mood. Like tonight, for instance, brand new to this post, she'd barely been on the station 2 hours when the officer of the watch tapped her to cover a shift for someone named Simmons, who had reported to sickbay. Kat hadn't even requisitioned her kit from stores yet. What a classic snafu. Everything was off kilter. Schedules delayed, launch sequences misaligned, posts vacant. With typical military efficiency, everyone's signals had been crossed. Kat had a recall out for the deck crew, mistakenly given liberty, but she didn't hold much hope that they'd surface. Just as well. She could use the solitude, and one command console operated pretty much like any other in the military. The United Aerospace Command, or AeroCom, favored consistency. In their tech, anyway. Besides, she trained in computer infiltration for her military occupational specialty. There wasn't a system in service or development she couldn't run, take apart, or break into. She was familiarizing herself with this particular setup when a change in the outside ambiance drew her attention. Oh, mercy. She let out an appreciative breath as the ship she'd just cleared for departure came into view directly overhead. If the flight path hadn't crossed a few clicks above her observation dome, she likely wouldn't have seen the ship's movement. The Cromwell, a prototype McCormick-class attack vessel built and outfitted right here at the research and development end of the station, blended into the texture of space. Her running lights flickered, the only glimmer against the darkness, barely illuminating the matte finish of the hull in microbursts. The black surface's engineered tincture all but absorbed the flashes, further dampened by the almost cellular hatch markings engraved on the ablative hull plating. The ultimate in space camo for ships, AeroCom systems registered the vessel. They knew what to look for, but as of yet, no one else could. If it weren't for alert beacons used during conventional flight, the ship would have been a hazard. Shielded against every form of observation short of up-close visual sight, the vessel represented a covert marvel, the prize of any fleet. The trade-off to achieve the equivalent of a sniper ship, the Cromwell sacrificed heavier armor for speed, advanced stealth, and weaponry. So basically, she wasn't any more difficult to disable than her less stealthy counterparts once the adversary knew her coordinates. Of course, by then, it was theoretically too late. Ping, ping! Cat didn't even twitch as the comm system alert tone sounded through the chamber. That would be Tact Stanton, commander of the Alexei, the ship that should have been the next to deploy. Let him stew. She'd encountered him before, never a pleasant experience. In fact, he seemed to go out of his way to be as difficult as possible, no matter the situation. He should be grateful his ship was getting out of here any time this solar week, given the mess she'd have to sort through when she came on shift. As the Cromwell deployed, Cat's resentment burned raw. She should be on that ship. Instead, they'd stuck her on this station while her team, went off to patrol the stars. It made no sense. She had just climbed from the ranks of combat infantry to special ops, only to be notified that she had psych-tested out of her team after only a month. Cat expected that her mother actually had something to do with that ruling. It wouldn't be the first time she'd called in favors to interfere with Cat's reckless career choices. Hell, Cat had to enlist with AeroCom and journeyed all the way to the Tau Ceti star system just to serve. Not that her efforts had proven completely successful. Cat had more than enough points to have earned her sergeant's stripes, but Mother had her papers so tied up in red tape that Cat might be retired before she ranked up. Not that she had any proof of that beyond past experience. In any case, for reasons military command wouldn't explain, they had given Cat two options: punch a keypad or push a broom. Rebelliously, she'd nearly grabbed for the broom. Let them waste years of intense military training and proven combat experience right along with her multi-million-dollar transport fee. Only her honor stood in the way of such retaliation. She had sworn an oath to stand between the common people and the harm they might suffer from not only the Legion but at the hands of pirates and corporations and the faceless, as yet undiscovered dangers lurking in space. AeroCom may not have forgotten this. Cat could not. Cat swallowed her bitterness and grudgingly accepted her unsought role of station support staff. She would diligently work every shift she could pull to bring her closer to the day she earned her ticket home. Heck, she hadn't even unpacked her duffel before she clocked in on the roster. She'd still have to stick around until she served her tour, but at least she'd have a ride out of here at the end. The alert tone sounded once again, somehow seeming more insistent. Again, Cat ignored it. Only an emergency signal obligated control to respond to hails from vessels waiting in the queue, and this gave no indication of an emergency. Hands splayed over the keypad, set below flush onto the hip-high console, she entered the final release sequence and sent the Cromwell off ahead of schedule with a silent salute. After all, the timetable was already screwed up. The quicker they could departed, the sooner she could adjust to her exile. The vessel drifted the prescribed distance before engaging its drive system. From the command deck, her sensors registered the telltale vapors bubbling in the ship's wake as the Cromwell initiated its electrogravitic drive envelope. With her brown eyes burning, she smothered her resentment anew. Her team, the 142nd Mobile Special Operations Team, informally known as Daire's Devils, counted among the vessel's complement of regular troops and special ops teams. Though she had been the newest member of her team, they already felt like family. Being parted from them stung like a betrayal. Whether on her part, theirs, or the bureaucracy's, she couldn't say, but it didn't sit well. Had she rung out of training, no one would have blamed her for knowing her limitations, but to have her superiors determine her, an experienced operative, substandard didn't sit well. To be labeled out of all those in her team as unacceptable and not even know why. Her fingers clawed the console housing, thankfully in no danger of triggering the recessed keypads. With a deep breath and hard discipline, she forced her bitterness back into its crater and mentally rolled a rock over it. She then turned her focus back to the task at hand. With the Cromwell clear, she began to process the next vessel. This time, she opened the channel as the alert tone persisted. "You incompetent fool! Can't you follow a deployment schedule?" Cat's lips tightened into a thin, hard line, and her hands fisted reflexively. Her mood darkened even further at the thought of dealing with the notorious Commander Tact Stanton. Pompous ass. They had had dealings with one another when she'd shipped to the Tau Ceti system, and occasionally since then. She would never understand how such a slug had risen to command level. A glitch in the A glitch in the deployment systems required minor adjustments to get things back on track, Commander, she responded across the open channel in her own careful, neutral tone. Glitch? Station Commander Guy will... Cat cut him off. The Alexei's next in the queue. Is your vessel ready to deploy? If not, I can process the incoming Haribon transport. Yes! He snapped out the single word hard and tight, cutting her off. We are more than ready. Cat's eyes narrowed. Stanton was way too worked up over a simple delay even for him. Commencing pre-deployment scans now. Position your craft for launch, she instructed him as she reviewed the data feed for anomalies. She noted a small mass registering out near Tagalong, just cresting the planetesimal's horizon. She initiated second-tier scans, but they revealed no recognizable mechanics or transmissions. Density analysis suggested low mineral content and no ferrous deposits. Just a rock, roughly the size, if not the shape, of a good-sized yacht. It fell outside of the scheduled flight path, so she made a note of her observations and beamed a copy of the report to the Alexei's flight crew along with their release codes. You are clear to deploy. She did not linger to watch this vessel. Turning back to her monitor, she started on the next flight plan. She didn't get far. The console in front of her registered an unauthorized communications burst tight beam to the station. It ended before she could intercept it through one of the perimeter sensors. Probably Stanton griping to Guy because she'd made him wait. Great. She'd been on station only a few hours and the first complaint had already been added to her docket. Kat shrugged off her annoyance. She might not be happy with the turn her career had taken, but she had duties to fulfill and too much honor not to care. Turning back toward the transparent shielding that allowed her a direct visual of her domain, Kat scanned the deep black oblivion. Toward her distant left, in the direction the Alexei had launched, she saw a ghostly glimmer like the after-image of a camera flash and nothing else. Had the Alexei had enough time to engage its drive and rocket out of range? Kat didn't think so. The older vessel ran with fusion impulse engines. Something just didn't feel right. Kat sequenced a full system scan, engaging all the remote sensors linked to her console. Reviewing the feed as it processed, her every muscle tightened like a steady ripple of a python's coil. She sent a secure quick burst query to the Alexei's comm and waited for the security-coded confirmation. The deck comm remained silent. If her dark brown hair wasn't already bristle-brushed short, it would have stood on end. Adrenaline sharp-focused her thoughts in an instant. A growl rumbled in her throat. Her left hand reflexively itched for her gaze rifle, currently locked away in her weapons locker aboard the Cromwell, probably already assigned to someone else. Instead, she hit the print button on her console, and the report scrolled out in a thin slice of durable acryl sheet. The hard copy confirmed her suspicions. Readings showed no sign that the Alexei had initiated its drive system. The ship couldn't have moved beyond visual on the conventional thrusters. It definitely should still be within hailing range. Control to Commander Guy, she sent out a hail to the station commander. Precious minutes passed with no response. She needed his clearance to initiate high alert status. Control to Commander Guy, please come in, sir. She repeated as she keyed in an urgency code linked to the message. Still no response. Her internal alarms went into overdrive. On station, there was no time Guy could call completely his own. Moments of crisis superseded everything. Station commanders were always online, their personal comms bone-jacked directly into their jaw just below their ear, same as ship's captains or elite military squads. Her hand went to the side of her now deactivated subdermal comm. She missed the buzzing sensation of someone's words transmitting along her jaw. Sometimes she thought she felt the faint vibration indicating a live feed, but she attributed that to wishful thinking. Kat set the hail on auto-replay. Then, uncertain of the commander's status and faced with a high probability of threat to station security, she snapped into action without command authorization. Flipping open the cap that covered the alert toggle, she notched it to the next level, setting off a klaxon throughout the security zones of the station. No need to panic the civvies yet. Not 3 minutes after the alarm sounded, the station's first defense, a wing of Condor-class scout vessels, jutted from their hangars like canned air from a hull breach. Control to Wing Command, do you copy? Mustang Sally reading you loud and clear, Control, where we heading? Neither the flatness of the transmission nor the gravity of the situation took the color out of the pilot's irrepressible Texas twang. Finally, a friendly voice, and bonus one likewise from Earth. Kat allowed herself the briefest of smiles and responded. Spread your wing out in the vector scan of quadrant 0689 Alpha, looking for unaccounted debris, followed by a deep space scan from that location targeting the vessel Alexei in ident code ND061. Presume hostiles are in the area. Should you make contact with the Alexei, secure absolute confirmation of the ship's status. Over. Gotcha. Sally off. As they headed to the coordinates she beamed to them, Kat initiated the high alert protocol. Her fingers flew over the keypad. First, she punched in the locator sequence keyed to Commander Guy. A schematic of the station appeared on the monitor before her. The spiraling design corkscrewed around a central maintenance tube, the pairs of directional thrusters running along the coil's outer edges. The command, or C deck, in the head, angled out into space to allow control and unobstructed view of the docking area, the shipyard, and most approach vectors, with auxiliary C decks at key points along the complex. Commander Chand Sver Guy's designation did not register on any coil. Nervous tension sizzled through Kat. No way Guy had left the station. From just the short time she'd spent in his presence as she handed over her orders, she recognized him as hardcore and dedicated. She sent a priority-quoted message to the head of station security with a secondary request to search for the commander once they had confirmed the station secure from outside threat. Extremely uneasy, Kat took the perimeter sensors off standby and set them to full sector scan. One keystroke transformed the transparent observation dome into a split-screen display, allowing her to view the Groom experimental complex's total perimeter via the remote sensors while monitoring the constant data feed. She then initiated the security fields around the station's defense hubs and essential operations. The personnel manning those stations ran through their own checklists. She initiated next stage high alert protocols, triggering orders activating all security squads off duty and on. Incoming and outgoing ship traffic paused once again, which caused more than a little uproar until Kat turned off the non-station transmissions, and all station personnel were on standby waiting, as her pawpaw would say, for the shit to hit the fan. Behind Kat, the hiss of the command deck hatch sent another spike of tension down her spine, mingled with a trickle of relief. Soon this will all be someone else's headache, she thought, as she input the final sequence in the security protocol, sending out the ancillary black box beacon. The beacon would receive low-frequency data pulses mirroring those fed to the station's black box unit from the external sensors, double documenting the incident to aid military intelligence tactical units should things go decidedly not well. The distinctive sound of the commander's footsteps crossing the incinerated any relief Kat had briefly felt. He stopped just behind her and to her right in an overt effort to intimidate. The silence weighed more than with each second that passed. Sarge never would have employed such low tactics with someone under his command, especially not for doing their duty, but then what did she know? Maybe commanding the Devils took a different approach than running a space station. Shaking off the too fresh memories of her old team, Kat suppressed the growing impulse to spin and crouch as if an enemy stood at her back. Somehow it didn't seem it would ingratiate her with her new commander. At that thought, her hindbrain scrambled for her attention as her hand ran across the console in a seemingly idle gesture. The console still displaying the schematic of the station. Her throat muscles rippled reflexively beneath her collar, but her expression remained impassive as she glanced down. What the heck is going on? A blip representing Commander Guy should have registered on her monitor, yet Kat's icon remained the only one displayed. In the reflection off the dome, he watched her, a hard glimmer in his gaze. His censure issued a faint, bitter tang wafting from every pore. Corporal Alexander, stand down. Kat stepped back from the console and pivoted to face him back straight and gaze forward. What do you think you're doing? Guy demanded, both his tone and expression lethal. Kat kept her features schooled and her eyes blank as she replied. The Alexei is gone, sir. She launched, presumably moved beyond visual, and disappeared. Control observed a spatial anomaly, ran prescribed scans. Kat reached for the acrylic sheet printout and held it out for him to confirmation. Scans register no residual vapor trail, indicating the drive unit never engaged, yet the Alexei does not appear on any of our sensors. The vessel remains unresponsive to query. Guy glanced at the report and then back up. He stared at her a long, awkward moment, almost like a freeze frame, before saying, "That's it?" His expression crackled with disbelief on the surface, but she caught a glimmer of something darker rolling just beneath. "You called high alert, without authorization. For that. I initiated a priority alert hail, Commander. I received no response despite repeated transmissions. I was unable to summon the Alexei or yourself. Sir, station security protocol requires..." He slashed the air with the blade of his hand. "Enough! You initiated high alert without authorization because you missed a bit of drive vapor. You anticipated an attack scenario because I didn't respond to a hail. His eyes flashed, and he looked furious enough to send her out to scrub the hull without an MMU. It took an extreme effort for Kat not to flinch. Did you see an external threat? Was there an explosion? She shook her head, little more than a sharp twitch. Was there identifiable debris? She set her jaw and met his gaze head-on, keeping her own expression as neutral as she could manage. As yet unconfirmed, sir, pending the report of the Condor wing deployed. Commander Guy drew in a sharp breath. His cheek twitched and his expression went flat. Every reaction, every comment, prefaced by a subtle hesitation. Beneath her heart's heavy thudding, Kat clearly heard a death rattle, the final moments of her already ailing career ingloriously fading away. At this point, she may well have to walk home. As they stared each other down, the emergency deck crew popped through the hatch. Sackmeister, Commander Guy called out to one of the new arrivals. Kill that klaxon. Initiate stand-down and order that bloody wing back to the station. The commander kept his tone controlled as he summarily relieved Kat of her post. Deck crew dismissed. A chorus of yes sirs peppered the air as the crew, with the exception of Sackmeister, filed out the hatch. What the heck is going on? Kat remained at attention as the crew left the sea deck. She kept her eyes forward and slightly out of focus to elude Sack's sympathetic gaze. They'd gone through basic together the first time Kat tried to join the service, which only made this sting all the worse. She had planned to look him up once she got settled, but then plans changed. She found it difficult to keep silent when she heard the clack of the keys as Sack stepped the station down to alert status. As he keyed in the final sequence, he turned to Guy for further instruction. Dismissed. Sackmeister looked puzzled but did not question the order. Kat caught her breath coming out in short, sharp huffs as he left. She forced herself to a more natural rhythm, though her instincts screamed, "This is wrong." With exaggerated care, Guy laid the report on the console before him. He looked from it to her. "What were you doing on duty tonight, Alexander?" She wondered the same thing herself, but it was not her place to question protocol when summoned to duty. "Simmons is down in medbay, sir. The duty officer instructed me to cover his shift." Guy looked ready to savage both the hapless Simmons and herself. "And was this cleared with me?" She kept her expression neutral, though her nerves bug-crawled beneath the surface of her skin. Something bothered her about his voice, about the situation. She couldn't place it, though. Movement caught her attention. Oddly, his right hand jerked ever so slightly over and over, as if it plucked at an unseen harp. "Well?" Kat pulled her focus away from his hand and back to his face. I couldn't say, sir. The order came from Lieutenant Commander Connor." The commander's jaw went visibly tight, and his hands barely resisted clenching. She felt truly in his crosshairs now, though she could not imagine why. According to protocol, calling high alert had been justified, given the circumstances, and as for being on the sea deck at all, she was following orders. She remained silent and at attention, her eyes trained straight ahead. Even so, she noted Guy's gaze flickered slightly to the console displaying the data from the outer quadrants. She watched without watching as his fingers moved to the keypad. He called up the log of her shift. Kat thought he might have paled upon scanning the data. Guy left the console, coming to stand in front of her close. "You are suspended from duty, pending a full investigation. You are to report to your quarters and remain there until summoned. Acknowledged?" Kat wanted to protest, but she'd already crossed too many lines. No doubt an investigation would absolve her of any misconduct. If anything, Guy had acted inappropriately. Something felt very wrong here. If only her team were still around to back her up. Except she had to remind herself they were no longer her team. I said acknowledged. Guy's tone sounded one short step from erupting. "Yes, sir." "Dismissed." Kat executed a sharp about-face with all the military precision she could muster, and then strode from the command deck, back erect, chin held high. That pompous ass didn't deserve the oak leaf on his collar. Guy's cold blue eyes tracked the woman's movement as she left the room, the hatch hissing closed behind her. He remained still a moment, the sensations washing over him, transitioning from fear to rage to resignation and back again in an unending loop. There were occasional flickers of relief mingled in. He closed his eyes against the emotional onslaught and breathed deep, fighting for control. The fingers of his right hand resumed plucking at the air seemingly without notice as he turned back to the console in the printout that would be the death of him if he couldn't find a way to salvage the situation. Everything had been in place. He'd followed instructions implicitly, and yet, whether by design or happenstance, not much more could have gone wrong today. As if in response to his desperate thoughts, the comm chimed. He glanced over to see a blank viewing screen and an active status light. "C-Deck, Commander Guy speaking," he responded, though he received no hail. There was no response. Guy's jaw clenched reflexively as he reached out and keyed a code into the system, taking the comm line off automatic record. The moment he did, a familiar symbol appeared on screen, a stylized cross with all four arms of equal length, like four capital T's. A simple enough icon and unaffiliated with any group of which he had knowledge. It flashed briefly and then disappeared. "Guy," he tried again. "How you managed to fuck things up so royally I will never understand." A voice rife with static sounded over the comm, completely unidentifiable as man, woman, or even human. "Forget about the Cromwell for now. I want you to secure her technical specifications and then wipe them from the GEC system. Screw this up and you won't have to wonder what comes next." Before he could respond, not that he'd intended to, the status light went inactive. Guy tensed with the need to strike out, intensified by his inability to do so. His hands were bound and he'd been dropped in the middle of a mess from which Houdini couldn't escape. His family would be left without even his good name or his pension to comfort them. The chill of that realization traveled from the crown of Guy's head down to his toes. With one short, sharp huff of breath, he turned to the keypad, and his fingers worked like mad, trying to isolate the data he'd been ordered to deliver. Kat made no conscious decision to disobey, really. She fully intended to return to her quarters as instructed, but she kept remembering each anomaly that led her to this point. The unmanned stations, the Alexei disappearing from the scans, Commander Guy's lack of response, his code not registering per station protocol. Any one of those would trigger a red flag, but all of them together? Driven by instinct, Kat headed for the nearest auxiliary C-Deck, once again deserted, thanks to Guy's order to stand down. En route, she stopped at a security cache and armed herself with a variable velocity shotgun, a supply of non-lethal riot rounds, and a high-powered taser. Once again, she longed for her gauze rifle. Station board armaments were a joke compared to special ops issue. Kat slipped through the hatch. Using her special ops training to lock down the compartment, she disabled the outside access pad. She then moved to the console. Sitting down in front of the keypad with her weapons ready to hand, she tapped into the security protocols and accessed the monitoring system. Within moments, she had real-time close-ups of Guy and the main console feed to her display, as well as a wide-angle view of the primary C-Deck. At first, she saw nothing on the monitor except an odd symbol similar to a Crusader's cross, only without the extra bits between the arms. For several moments after, the screen remained blank, then the commander's fingers moved over the keys nearly as fast as her own. He accessed duty rosters and security details first. Her personnel jacket flashed on the screen, seeming to remain there infinitely longer than anything else. When requests for production specs and technical schematics replaced her file in the scrolling across the monitor, Kat's gut feeling of wrongness increased. Guy was after the Cromwell. Kat sent up a prayer of thanks that she'd deployed the ship early. That vessel in the hands of the wrong party. Not good. And the specs and the research data? Almost as bad. Deftly in applying her technical training, Kat intercepted Guy's requests, dispersing them harmlessly in the ether while she tied up his console with error messages and processing loops. It wouldn't stop him, but it bought her some time. The only way she could think of to remove the data from his reach was to initiate full alert. At an experimental complex like Groom that triggered an automatic wipe of the research databases, an annoyance for the scientists, but all the research data regularly backed up to an off-site server into the black box, lost to the bad guys but not anyone else. Much better than having the research fall into the hands of pirates or worse, rivals. The scientists would certainly agree on that point. Unfortunately, it took more than flipping a manual toggle to initiate full alert. If she had the codes in clearance, this would have taken a matter of minutes. She didn't. But she didn't need an actual full alert. All she needed to do was trigger the protocol that wiped the servers and dumped the data. If she couldn't pull that off, she wasn't worthy of her designation as a computer infiltration specialist. The computer keys rattled like hail on tarmac as she accessed the system, careful not to trigger any alarms. Groom was a high-security facility with Guy, the head man, in charge. She had no way of telling who else on the station he'd involved. She had to stay below the radar. One by one, she located the necessary codes, identified the protocols, slipped through backdoor channels, the entire time keeping an eye on the monitor for any sudden activity from Guy. It was a slow going, though, and every second she took increased the likelihood of someone noticing what she was up to.